As much as we all hate advertisements, everyone has at least one commercial or campaign that they like, because when done right, ads can be enjoyable, even mind-opening. And outside of computers, ads have gone well beyond billboards and TV commercials. Today, companies around the world devote themselves to digital signage, souped-up displays that show everything from simple messages and beautiful vistas to including touchscreens and cameras that allow you to interact with the ads directly. For example, instead of a simple map of a shopping center, how about a large screen that displays an animated life-size character to whom you can directly ask questions and receive answers through realistic speech synthesis? If you think that sounds like a very Japanese thing to do, you are correct. At the 2010 CeVIO convention, a group from the Nagoya Institute of Technology's International Voice Technology Program announced that it had completed a framework for speech interaction programs that it would release to the public. This engine, known as Mmd Agent, was demonstrated at the convention featuring a character called Mei Chen. People can talk to Mei Chen, in Japanese of course, and she will respond to them. So how does she work? Mmd Agent was made up of three primary features. The first was the representation of the character herself. As appropriate for its name, Mmd Agent used the Miku Miku Dance rendering engine to display its character models on the screen. The second was the speech recognition engine. Multiple Japanese universities, including the Nagoya Institute, spent years developing a continuous speech recognition engine known as Julius, and this was combined with a Japanese vocabulary and grammar database to enable the Mmd Agent program to understand Japanese speech. With those two systems in place, users could see Mei Chen on the screen and issue commands to her simply by talking to her. But it was the third piece, the speech synthesis engine, that let her respond verbally. Also developed in part by the Nagoya Institute, the speech synthesizer engine OpenJTalk was used for Mmd Agent, in collaboration with a trained voice database known as HTS. OpenJTalk was the synthesizer engine which converted text into speech information, and then HTS took over and produced the actual vocals. Suffice it to say, this is a very complex system, and what's really cool is that the entire thing is free and open source, minus the Mmd rendering engine, I assume. Mmd Agent or any of its individual pieces can be downloaded and used by anyone, though it does seem that active development of these various components ended in 2014. Let me get back on track though. You combine all three of those systems and the result is Mmd Agent, which was demonstrated with Mei Chen. So let's see Mei Chen in action.
皆様に自己紹介をお願いします。
はい、お集まりの皆様、はじめまして。私は音声情報案内システムのメイです。名古屋からやってきました。よろしくお願いします。
では早速ですが、Mmd Agent とはどういうものなのか説明してもらいましょう。めいちゃん、説明をお願いします。
はい、説明します。Mmd Agent は名古屋工業大学国際音声技術研究所で開発された音声インタラクションシステムを構築できるツールキットです。
And yes, this was 2010 and it was about voice synthesis, so you know who just had to make an appearance. I'm pretty sure it's Mei Chen's voice we're hearing from Miku though.
ところでミクさん、
はい、
普段は何をして過ごしているんですか？
動画サイトで歌ったり踊ったりしてます。
ではせっかくなので歌ってもらえますか？
もちろんです。それでは聴いてください。曲は教えて魔法のリリックです。
Mei Chen was refined and improved over time, and she was placed at the Nagoya Institute's main gate in 2011 to act as a guide, with her avatar appearing on the right large screen and the left screen displaying information and maps as needed. But her developers wanted something more than a guide for their own campus. I don't know precisely when these partnerships were made. Heck, I don't even know roughly when they were made. But in 2009, some of the researchers from the Nagoya Institute who would later work on Mmd Agent formed a small company called TechnoSpeech Incorporated. Later that year, they released a web-based singing synthesizer named Shinshi, which some of you may be familiar with. Seriously, the Nagoya Institute was all over the voice synthesizer scene in Japan starting from the turn of the millennium. So that's why Vocaloid was developed in Spain. Yamaha didn't want Nagoya to get its filthy hands on it. Anyway, sometime between 2009 and 2013, TechnoSpeech banded together with 4 other companies to take Mmd Agent's concept to the next level. TechnoSpeech developed the synthesis engines. VSync offered its expertise in digital signage and other technologies. Frontierworks, a well-known publisher of anime and such, helped with character designs. UltraSeep would handle the content generated by their future users. And Upfield hosted great office parties? I really don't know what they contributed, but all 5 of these companies combined to form the Defender of the Universe Voltron. I mean, the CeVIO project. As I said, I'm not exactly sure when the CeVIO project collaboration was officially formed, but that's just the group's name. What was it planning to do with all of these different talents? Mei Chen was interesting for a first attempt, but this is Japan, so they knew they simply had to make her cuter and improve on Mmd Agent's core technologies. This plan went into motion with the development of what would become the company's mascot characters, and CeVIO's first character, Satou Sasara, was front and center. CeVIO Vision was CeVIO Project's name for their initiative to replicate Mmd Agent's success with Mei Chen, but with greater complexity and with a character that would be more appealing, and Sasara definitely had that potential. In January 2013, Sasara's first public display was put up at the Animate store in that famous yet infamous Otaku paradise, Akihabara. Here's a short video of Sasara's display advertising a product you could buy inside the store.
画集僕は友達が少ないプリキュアアートワークスが2013年3月25日に発売となります。綺麗なイラストを数多く収録し、なんと平坂由美先生の書き下ろしによる短編小説も掲載。さらに初回限定版はフルカラー&修正加筆された僕は友達が少ない感もついた豪華なアイテムですよ。
As you can see, Sasara is being displayed as a 3D model, just like Mei Chen was with Mmd Agent. I don't know if Sasara is using the exact same rendering engine from Mmd Agent or if it's something completely new. But with her life-sized model and display, along with her speech synthesis, you can see how this would be a much warmer form of advertisement than simply having a commercial or promotional video play on the same display every few minutes. But acting as a simple advertisement was just the tip of the iceberg for Sasara. Remember, the Mmd Agent system was created specifically to power a speech interaction engine. Sasara was also able to answer questions and hold simple conversations with passersby, as you can see in this clip. The man seems to be holding a script of questions, so this is probably a test of Sasara's speech recognition system and her range of responses.
はい、東京出身の東京育ちです。自己主張が激しい B 型脱行です。うくく、それは本人だけの秘密なのです。あなたは？あなたはアニメートに降臨。
Sasara was a definite improvement over Mei Chen, with a more natural sounding voice and a wider range of topics that she would respond to. A couple months later, she was even updated to provide horoscopes, and you know how Japanese people love their horoscopes. But you remember how one of the 5 companies that make up the CeVIO project, UltraSeep, was brought on to handle user-generated content? What does that mean in the context of a talking billboard? Well, it's not so much about advertising as it is about the voice synthesis engine behind Sasara. While she was created primarily to interact with people through displays, she was also designed to be a tool that people could use to create their own media, similar to what the Vocaloid and Utaouv softwares allowed. So in late April 2013, at the Nico Nico Chokaigi convention, CeVIO Project revealed that Satou Sasara was available with her own speech synthesis software known as CeVIO Creative Studio Free, a feature-limited, free version of a commercial product that would be releasing later that year. Because it was free and it performed very well, it was a big success, and by the September of 2013, the full commercial version of the software was released, known as CeVIO Creative Studio, and it laid the foundation for what would become a small but growing franchise. Before I talk more in detail about the synthesis software itself, let me detail Sasara's character design and then introduce the other two CeVIO mascots that were produced shortly after she was. Satou Sasara is a 16-year-old Tokyo native. She stands at around 5'3", she has yellow-brown eyes, and her weight is listed as a girl's secret. She is described as a very typical Japanese girl who loves video games and anime. She is an eternal optimist, but she can be a bit clumsy. Her favorite foods are ice cream and monjayaki, a kind of savory pancake made with a very loose batter and filled with veggies and other ingredients. It is cooked on a griddle and then eaten directly off of it with a small, special spatula. As we'll see, the CeVIO software mascots were intentionally made rather generic because of the focus on using them for interacting with people. So they all have very simple outfits. Sasara's, for instance, is a faintly tan-colored sundress and a pair of low-profile shoes. The only other ornament is her hair, which is the color of hazel. It has a short ponytail which dangles from a twisted bun on her right side. She may not be colorful, but I like her natural appearance. It reminds me of that forest girl fashion trend in Japan that I really like, because it has a very subtle beauty. Next up is Suzuki Tsutsumi, who is 1 year older than Sasara and a longtime friend of hers. Despite that though, they are not especially close as they don't share many interests. Tsutsumi is cool-headed and doesn't talk much, though she can become a little energetic when talking about things she likes, which is primarily books. She's an avid reader and prefers reading to watching TV and movies. She can accomplish anything she sets her mind to and is considered to be a dependable older sister type. She is a pinch taller than Sasara and weighs around 100 pounds. Like Sasara's design, Tsutsumi's design is comprised of really only two colors. She wears a short-sleeved white blouse and white shorts, and the rest is dabba-dee-dabba-die blue. Her dark blue hair is cut fairly short. It comes down to the top of the nape of her neck, and she wears a lighter blue headband to hold up her bangs. She has some serious-looking blue eyes, a blue belt, and blue shoes. Tsutsumi's favorite foods are Chinese pork buns and kuzu mochi, a dessert made of mochi and kudzu starch. Sasara's profile lists her own birthday as January 22nd, but for some reason Tsutsumi doesn't want to share her own birthday. And finally we have the first male CeVIO voice bank, Takahashi. He is Sasara's neighbor and they have known each other so long that Sasara considers him to be her real big brother, but even she doesn't know what his first name is. He is 20 years old and nearly 6 feet tall. His favorite foods are ramen noodles and senbei, Japanese rice crackers. His birthday is September 26th, and his design is made up of whites, grays, and a few bits of black, though he has brown hair and eyes. His shirt is a sort of grayish-brown and is a short-sleeved button-up, with an unbuttoned, thin white coat worn over it with its sleeves rolled up. His slacks are the same grayish-brown as his shirt, and he's wearing some white dress shoes. He's not wearing any socks though, which is kind of odd. Actually, none of the CeVIO 3 are wearing socks. Do Japanese people not like socks? Like I said, these characters were made to be generic so that people could more easily relate to them. Sasara is from Tokyo, Tsutsumi is from Hanagawa Prefecture, and Takahashi is from Saitama Prefecture. These are all in the same region and comprise the first, second, and fifth most populous prefectures in Japan. Also, Sato, Suzuki, and Takahashi are the first, second, and third most common surnames in Japan. So the trio represent your typical, modern, urban Japanese youth, because that's the primary demographic for CeVIO Vision, teens and young adults, and presumably mostly males. And I don't say mostly males just because 2 of the 3 CeVIO characters are pretty young girls. Sasara has her own website, and if you look at the character information page, it shows Sasara and Tsutsumi, but not Takahashi. He's mentioned nowhere on her site, and he doesn't appear on the box for the CeVIO Creative Studio software either. And also, when the commercial version of Creative Studio first went on sale, 100 limited editions were sold which came with towels printed with a picture of Sasara in a bikini. Oh, Japan, Japan, Japan. Okay, now let's talk about CeVIO Creative Studio. The commercial version was released September 26, 2013, and that is the same date that Tsutsumi and Takahashi were released. Sasara was included in the free version of Creative Studio, but if you bought the full version, not only would you unlock all of the features of Creative Studio, including more detailed voice manipulation options, but you would also gain access to Tsutsumi and Takahashi. At roughly $130 when it launched, Creative Studio wasn't cheap, even though it was a fair price considering you got 3 text-to-speech synthesizers in one package, but there was one other small feature that I haven't mentioned yet which will make it seem like a better deal. I'll get to it soon. As a text-to-speech synthesizer, as far as the end user is concerned, it works in a similar way to the VoiceRoid engine, developed by AtH software. Instead of typing in blocks of text, however, lines of text are entered separately. Part of the reason this is done is because the CeVIO engine was designed specifically for interaction, so speaking a whole paragraph at a time is generally unnecessary. While this may not seem like a positive if all you want is a program to read large amounts of text, CeVIO can still do that with a little work, and it makes it easier to do some other creative things. Creative Studio allows you to create multiple tracks, which means you can create conversations within Creative Studio, rather than just have one voice speak a single block of text. Here's an example of Sasara's voice being used on multiple tracks, with the bottom track being her normal voice and the other 2 tracks being altered to sound like boys.
パンコントロール、音の位置を変更、細かい修正をして、再生をクリック、聞いてみましょう。ちょっと男子、ちゃんと掃除しなさいよね。うるせえ。男が掃除なんてできるかよ。そこに痺れる。憧れる。
Each track can have its own lines and parameters, so it creates many more possibilities than your typical text-to-speech synthesizer. Speaking of parameters, this is where CeVIO separates itself even further from programs you've seen before. Before I continue, that multiple tracks example was from the 2013 version of Creative Studio Free, which was discontinued last November. The current version of Creative Studio is known as Creative Studio S, and I'll be using its free 1-month trial for some of the following demonstrations. As is typical of these TTS programs, the voice output can be adjusted in various ways. For instance, every speaking voice bank has 4 basic parameters to alter. The first is loudness, the second is speed, the third quality translates to height, which I assume refers to pitch, and the fourth means voice type, which is kind of like an age slider. Loudness is just a volume setting, so I think I can skip demonstrating that. Here is the speed parameter set to the default of 50%, then 100%, and then 0%, which is my favorite because it makes Sasara sound like she's at the tail end of her first night of drinking.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
Next we have pitch.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。 マグロ食べたい。
And finally, voice type.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
I adjusted these parameters independently, but of course you can mix them up however you like. These controls apply to the entire line of text, so to give you control over the individual syllables, there is a second control panel with 3 functions, adjusting pitch, length, and volume, which can all greatly impact the inflection and mood of the line being spoken.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
And now we come to the control panel that really makes CeVIO unique among TTS programs. In Sasara's original release, there were 3 bars to the right of the parameters, but now she has 4. These correspond to the different voices that Sasara offers. They are known as energetic, happy, angry, and sad. But you'll notice that 3 of these bars are at 0% and the first one, energetic, is at 100%. Plus you see that large yellow bar directly in the center? What's that about? Well, let me demonstrate her 4 voices with all other parameters set to their default values.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
That's pretty cool, right? 4 different voices for one character. But it gets even better. You can choose to use part of one voice and part of another. For example, let's set Sasara's voices to 50% energetic, 50% sad, and play the sample again.
マグロ食べたい。
Now let's do 50% sad and 50% angry, or 30% happy and 70% angry.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
This is probably reminding you a bit of Vocaloid 4's cross-synthesis feature. I don't know if the mechanics behind the 2 features are similar, but the point is that you can indeed blend 2 of Sasara's voices to create a new voice, and with 4 different voices to choose from you have a lot of variety. But there's even more. You can blend all 4 of her voices if you want to. Here's 1/3 energetic, 1/3 happy, and 1/3 sad.
マグロ食べたい。
And now an even amount of all 4 voices.
マグロ食べたい。
That's a really interesting feature. It makes Sasara an extremely versatile speaker, and if you were someone who was in the business of digital signage, who wanted to use Sasara's voices for simple advertisements or as an information kiosk, you can see how this could be a very impressive tool with a lot of potential. Though they don't have as many options as Sasara does, Tsutsumi and Takahashi also have different voices available. Tsutsumi has 2, Cool, which is her default voice, and Dere, the loving voice she uses when she's happy. Takahashi has 3, Energetic, Normal, and the third voice name translates to hollow or dented. These can all be blended together as well. First, I'll demonstrate Tsutsumi's voices and then Takahashi's.
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。マグロ食べたい。
So Sasara has 4 voices, Tsutsumi has 2, and Takahashi has 3. And when the voices are blended and parameters are edited, you can end up with dozens of different voices, all from one little program. That $130-ish price tag doesn't seem so outlandish now, does it? It's a very powerful program, and as an observer, I feel that CeVIO got everything right that it needed to for its intended usage as an interaction-focused TTS program. But you remember how I said there was a teensy-weensy feature that I haven't talked about yet? Well, Sasara has one more trick up her sleeve. She can sing. Sasara isn't the primary CeVIO character simply because she was created first, but because she has a singing voice bank in addition to her speaking voice bank. Unlike the synthesizer engines I've talked about before, the CeVIO engine is capable of synthesizing speech and singing, all in the same program. If you create a new track using a singing database instead of a speaking one and edit that track, Creative Studio switches to the song synthesizer portion of the program. This mode will be much more familiar to you if you have experience with Vocaloid or Utau, as it is similar to those programs. While not as featureful as the Vocaloid 4 editor, for example, you can do some of the same simple parameter changes. You have different screens that allow for adjustment of pitch, timing, volume, and 2 vibrato settings. Unlike Sasara's speech voice bank, her singing voice bank does not offer different voices, but you do have a voice type adjustment slider which I think performs the same as the H slider in her speech voice bank. This applies to the whole track though, so if you want this at different values for different parts of a song, you'll have to make different tracks. While the speech synthesis portion of CeVIO is more fleshed out and complex, the song synthesis feature has given it more notoriety among vocal synth fans. Sasara's voice isn't bad at all, and since it was included with Creative Studio free starting in June 2013, many people used it and became enamored with Sasara. So much so that they continued to use the free version despite its limitations for a long time after the commercial version was released, as it was capable of sounding really good despite being free. Because of her ability to do narration, Talkaloid videos, short skits, poetry reading, and singing, Satou Sasara has accumulated over 4,500 videos on her Nico Nico tag, of which around 750 are original songs. That's pretty impressive considering how recently the software released. But CeVIO does have some issues that limit its appeal in certain ways. The most obvious problem with CeVIO if you want to use it as a non-Japanese person is that the user interface for the program is completely in Japanese, with no option for English or any other language for that matter. In fact, the software won't even work properly if you try to launch it without app locale or Japanese non-Unicode settings. But it is a Japanese product for the Japanese market, and it's something that should be relatively easy to patch in if CeVIO sees enough demand for it. And if you are somewhat familiar with Japanese and you have Vocaloid or Utau experience, you can figure out how to use most of the basic features. The bigger problem with CeVIO is the quality of the synthesis, which is pretty important for a voice synthesis engine. Let me play you a sample of Takahashi speaking.
この思い出のマーニーのストーリーを簡潔に説明します。12歳の少女、アンナは、生い立ちと、対人関係に悩んでいました。そんなある時アンナは、病気の療養のために、おばが暮らす田舎へ一人引っ越すことになります。そしてその場所で、マーニーという。
You probably noticed a significant buzzing noise in his words that is apparent throughout his entire monologue. This is referred to as engine noise by some people when talking about voice synthesizers, and it refers to the noise that is created when a voice is artificially manipulated so much that it no longer sounds natural. The degree of noise in any given synthesizer is the total of the noise generated through the different processes required by that specific engine. And different engines have different processes for performing the synthesis, so some will produce more realistic results than others. Because of CeVIO's very noticeable amount of noise, it is often considered an inferior synthesizer engine compared to the likes of Vocaloid, Voicedroid, or Utau, although these synthesizers are not immune to the problem themselves. CeVIO's noise is simply much more noticeable and difficult to avoid if you're a user. How difficult this will be to improve depends entirely on how the CeVIO synthesizer's core works. This may not be seen as an issue at all when these voice banks are used for digital signage, as being in an open area with a lot of ambient noise, such as a busy street or a crowded mall, will mask the engine noise. But when used for narrating game footage or a commercial, or for music on your stereo, or especially with headphones, the noise can be distracting. This doesn't mean that CeVIO can't sound pleasant, but it is admittedly more difficult to imagine that the voice is coming from a person rather than a synthesizer, although not all CeVIO voice banks will have the same amount of noise. Takahashi's voices seem to have more noise in them than Sasara's do, for example, which may be why he is not displayed as prominently as the girls are. Before I move on to song and speech examples, let me go over purchasing CeVIO Creative Studio. Prior to the launch of Creative Studio S in November 2014, Creative Studio was an all-or-nothing deal. There was one package available, which included both of Sasara's voice banks, Tsutsumi's voice bank, and Takahashi's voice bank, for roughly $130. Not really a bad deal at the time, but if you only wanted Sasara's singing voice bank or only Takahashi's talking voice bank, you'd have no choice but to buy the whole thing. So with the release of Creative Studio S, CeVIO revamped their product lineup to allow people to buy everything a la carte. If you do want the full deal, the same which was offered before the purchase options changed, you can still find copies of CeVIO Creative Studio on Amazon Japan. Purchasing this will give you the complete set for Sasara, Tsutsumi, and Takahashi, and you can download an update which will upgrade this to the new Creative Studio S program for free. The problem is that this deal is only available as a physical copy, and of course Amazon Japan won't ship it overseas. You are literally buying leftover copies of the original run of Creative Studio, as Creative Studio S was never released in a box. If this still interests you, Creative Studio is currently on sale for close to $82. Just remember that you'll need to use a forwarding service to get it. If you only want one or two pieces of the Creative Studio package, or you'd rather buy it digitally and avoid shipping charges, things get a little complicated, but I'll try to simplify it. Though Creative Studio is one program, it actually runs two separate editors, one for speech voice banks, aka talk voices, and one for singing voice banks, aka song voices. There are 3 talk voices for Creative Studio's original release, Sasara, Tsutsumi, and Takahashi, as well as one song voice for Sasara. Each of these products is available on its own or as a starter pack. These starter packs include the necessary editor to use whichever kind of voice you're purchasing. For example, Tsutsumi's starter pack gives you her talk voice as well as the talk editor. Purchasing Sasara's song voice starter pack gives you her song voice and the song editor. Once you bought a starter pack for either voice type, talk or song, you don't need to buy another starter pack of that type. You can just buy voices on their own. So for instance, if you bought Sasara's talk starter pack and a month or two later you wanted to grab Takahashi's talk voice, you would just buy his talk voice and not his talk starter pack. But if you buy Sasara's talk starter pack, you don't get her song voice or the song editor. Since Sasara does have both kinds of voices though, there is a combo pack you can buy if you want both of her starters. Anyway, if you want to buy one of these CeVIO products, they aren't sold directly by CeVIO. You can snag them either at the Japanese Rakuten site or a Japanese company called Vector, which specializes in PC software. Vector is having a sale on the CeVIO Trio's products that ends November 25th, so now's a good time to get them if you're interested. But I'll be listing the normal undiscounted prices here. Both sites are in Japanese of course, but they do accept credit cards and PayPal. Each of the 3 talk voice starters are $53. Sasara's song voice starter is a little more expensive at $71. Sasara's combination talk and song starter is $89. If you already own the talk editor, their individual talk voices are $27. And finally, if you already own the song editor, Sasara's song voice is $35. Since you can't just buy the editors all by themselves, you might be wondering how you can own the song editor without owning Sasara's song voice. Patience, my friends. This was CeVIO's humble beginnings, and while it has grown a bit in these past 2 years, it still has a long way to go to compete with the long-established synthesizers. That is, if the CeVIO project even wants to compete with them. If I had made this video in 2013, I might have said that CeVIO was doing its own thing, and that it was primarily competing only with text-to-speech synthesizers. But given what has released for CeVIO throughout this year, I'd say that the company now has reason to consider focusing as much on the singing aspects of the CeVIO engine as its speech capabilities. CeVIO definitely has room for improvement, a lot of room, but it also has huge potential. Sasara's singing voice is actually quite beautiful, and it can sing very high notes and sound very good doing it, something I can't say for a lot of Vocaloids. And the versatility of her speech synthesis is undeniable. Tsutsumi's not quite as complex, and Takahashi's voice doesn't seem to be on the same quality level as the girls, but I think it was a fair start for CeVIO. If the CeVIO project is content with focusing on commercial applications of its software with digital signage and kiosks and such, that's fine, but if it wants to become more recognizable among vocal synth fans, CeVIO is going to need some star power and a bigger product portfolio, wishes that were granted earlier this year. It's been less than 3 years since Sasara's debut though, and so far, I think it's doing pretty well. Admittedly, the majority of CeVIO's early attention and fans were earned because of the Creative Studio free version, which was plenty powerful to do Minecraft videos and songs alike, and not as many people have put up the cash to buy the commercial version now that the free version no longer works. But Sasara has a dedicated following for her understated yet no less appreciable beauty, her presence in the Nico Nico game narration scene, and for her lovely voice. For this video's examples section, I will be showcasing a lot of speech synthesis as Sasara is the only character with a singing voice bank, and it wouldn't be fair if I just played 8 Sasara songs and called it a day. These Talkaloid videos won't have subtitles, so I apologize if you find the speech examples uninteresting. Stay tuned for my next video, which will detail CeVIO's Shooting Star and the Orange of My Eye.
探し続けた雨の中で濡れる瞳に終焉の日を見上げる瞳最愛の人と重ねてゆく始まりはどこかで消えた愛しさの意味を知ることに雨の後に訪れるの僕の背中越えてゆくもの見えない傷の痛みにうずく羽を持った天使たち灰夜の手を振り離す君を笑い続ける花びらの想いが一る声が突き刺さる視線を越えていく切れてきた影が十のならば果ためく道は君の声がて瞳風をキャッチるならば僕は新しいマイナスを選ぶことを迷いはしない間違いなど作ってくもの
なんとかなるよね。ここが事務所か。おはようございます。あれ誰もいないのかな。なんだろうこれっていうか怖い。
君だ、鈴木さん。
はい、そうですけど。
僕は高橋、君と同じ候補生なんだ。一緒に頑張ろう。
はい、よろしくお願いします。おかしいな。さっきは誰もいなかった気がしたんだけど。あれ
どうしたの？
すみません。なんていうかよく、薄いって言われないですか？
幸薄いタイプってよく言われるよ。
いえ、そういうことじゃなくて、物理的に薄いというか。
そうだね。ちょっと痩せ型かな。
痩せてるとか、そういう次元じゃないような、具体的には2次元と3次元ぐらい違う気がするんですけど。
鈴木さん、来てたんですね。こんにちは。佐藤ささらです。
はい、はじめまして、鈴木つづみです。
よろしくお願いします。早速ですが、ちょっと聞きたいことがあるんですけど。
何ですか？
高橋さんって人、どういう方なんですか？っていいか人ですか？
それが、私も今日お会いしたばかりで、まだあまり親しくなくて。
そうですか。
気になりますよね。下の名前。
私にはもっと気になることがあるんですが。
でもそんな高橋さんですけど、すごいんですよ。高橋さん、あれやってもらっていいですか？
あれ、疲れるんだよな。まあいいか、鈴木ちゃんのためだ。
あれって何です？空気でも入れて膨らむんですか？
まあ見ててください。こうやって、声の高さを下げるとですね。
声の高さってこうやって変えるんだ。というか、薄くなったのはこのせいじゃないんですか？
こんにちは、鈴木さん。今日は、君に会えて嬉しいよ。
やだ、何このイケボ。
声を低くすると、とっても素敵なおじさま声になるんですよ。
それよりササラちゃん、探し物は見つかったのかい？
探し物？
ササラちゃんは今、パンツを探してて。
パンツ？
なんだったら、僕が君のパンツに。
それが、
君の潜在感情、僕に早く見せておくれよ。春が覚めたら、聞こえた声。何かが動き出しそうで、急いで窓を開けてみたよ。世界は何も変わらなかったけど、声は続く、息を吸って吐き出すよ。心のガスだけ半径1メートルから未来描くレインボーから笑ったことだって泣いたことだって人に変えよう。最初から全て始まるようにほら心が高鳴っている。世界は虹色に変わるよ。
ササラがいつもお世話になってます。まだこの界隈のことよく知りませんけど、ササラは元気でやってましたか？聞くところによると、ここではササラ結構人気者らしいですね。私もササラが出てる動画を見てみることにします。もう1600件も動画があるんですね。すごい。この動画とかどうでしょう？きっとササラが可愛く踊っているプロモーションビデオか何かですかね。
ダメ。それ見たらダメ
これはササラのマスコットキャラ的な何かなの？
そんな感じかな。
ふーん。かわいい。さすが私のササラ。
何か言った？
いや、別に。
そんなことより挨拶回り行きますよ。
暖かすぎる風は何を運ぶのか。期待してることは何が起こるのか。掴んだものはこの手すり抜けた。それでも笑ってる君の姿探す。花は咲き乱れ泣く者は誰もいない。願い叶いで君が待つ星の酒を持って。
何これ。すごく、まがまがしいです。いや、これ、絶対なんか悪魔でしょ。これ、悪魔だよ。悪魔住んでるよ。これ。うさぎ。ということは、あの人が、私の先輩？お邪魔します。緊張してドアがうまく閉められない。 あれ、中は意外に普通ですね。かまどや作業台なども設置されていて、さすがはクラフターって感じですね。
うわ、何ですか、急に叫んだりして。人の顔見るなり、悲鳴を上げるとか失礼じゃありませんか。
そんなとこいたら、ビビるに決まっとるて。大きい声を出したことについては、すいません。それはすいません。
はあ。それより喋り方が。
今のは何でもありません。気のせいです。
そうですか。そういえば、
君がいるその鳥かごは君がいるべき場所じゃない。君が背を向ける鉄越しの向こう、広い世界に希望はある。退屈な授業が終わり、暖かな日差しが差すつかの間の昼休み、今日もまた一人きり、なんとなく自由だけどどこへも行けないの。角の中の鳥は裏目しそうに空を見た。
具体的に見ていくと言いましたが、前提としてこれらの要素があります。要するにヒーローモードクリアできる程度の操作力、知識ってことだね。
俺、まだラスボス倒してない。
ヒーローモードで、ラスボスの手前あたりまで進められていれば十分だと思います。もしまだ全然手つかずだという人がいたら、まず一人モードを進めてみてください。それでは、実際にイカスタワーのロビーへ向かってみましょう。そして縄張りバトルに、と行きたいところですが、その前にまずやっておくことがあります。
まだ始められないの？
気づいている方も多いかもしれませんが、試合を始める前に、ステージを下見することができるんです。ここで実際にステージのあちこちを確認しておくことはとっても大事です。どこが通れて、どこが通れないか、どこが登れて、どこが登れないか、そういうことをチェックしておくと、とても役に立ちます。
なるほど。まあ何も知らないよりはやっておいた方がいいよな。
なるべくいろんなところを見てみてくださいね。ちなみに今回使用する武器は、若葉シューターです。最初から持っている武器ですし、無理がしやすくてバリアも使えるので、初心者にとって一番の武器ですね。散歩が終わったら、いよいよバトルに入ります。
新しい街、始まりの予感、部屋に差し込む柔らかな光、いつもの朝が輝きを増して、南の風が背中押してるみたい。婚活プールで木のホームすり抜けていくサイド無敵なもん、僕はその瞬間を逃さない。見つけたよドキドキ眩しくて、スローモーションで交差する時の中で、全てが色を変えてゆく。憧れて夢に見ていた笑顔が届きそうで、手を伸ばすよご自分。時は目をそらしたことも、涙を流して泣いた時も、いつも見守ってくれたことに心からありがとう。この胸にあることは君に伝えたら、その歌声が届くたびに笑顔が溢れてるよ。君が 違いの乗り立ちで幸せな君ドキドキな胸踊り出すちょっと今年の冬は